Up Winery, and we're
Okay.
hi. I'm Elizabeth Smith, and I'm here with Dave Specter of Bells Up Winery, and we're just gonna have a little tasting session tonight. And I thought Dave might want to just tell you briefly about Bells Up, and then take us through three of their wines.
Sure. So thanks, Elizabeth, for having me on and chatting with me. My name is Dave Specter. As she said, I'm the owner, the winemaker, the tractor driver, the pretty much the day-to-day operator for Bells Up Winery in Newberg, Oregon. We're one of the smallest wineries in the Willamette Valley, make about 600 total cases per year amongst all of the different wines that we do. We take, when people come in for an appointment, it's one-on-one with me. We don't have any employees, so it's just me, and you're the only group that's there. We do not distribute our wines anywhere in the country, stores, restaurants, anything like that. So we sell 100% of what we make direct to consumer, but we ship all over the place, and I have a national customer base. And when folks are here, we focus on showing people a good time and making really good wine and just kind of relaxing and walking through, why it is that we do what we do. We kind of have a different slant to what we do than a lot of folks in the valley. So I think it's a fun opportunity for folks just to kind of get into the minds of somebody who does this full time. And as you know, Elizabeth, wine has such a romanticized view of it a lot of times. So we get things down to the very real, but then also say, yeah, there's this opportunity for the joy and the artistic part of what we do, and we just kind of love sharing all of that with folks. So the one-on-one is what works best for that. And so we make a lot of different wines, and I know we're going to talk about three of them tonight. So where do you want to start?
I want to start with sparkling, of course.
Lead off with bubbles, never hurts. So
That's
I
right.
suppose one thing I should talk about real quick before we start is we have a
Okay.
theme to our winery, and it's based around the French horn. I
Yes.
was a French horn player for 20 years. When I was in college at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio, I was in the symphony, wind ensemble. I was good enough to have a chance at a performance career. As I always say, I like to think I was smart enough not to pursue it because I know how difficult it would have been. But because I played and because I had all these great experiences, years and years later, when it came time to start the winery, one of the things we were thinking about was how do we get people to connect? And as a small place, the thing that makes us stand out most of all is our connections with our customers. And I wanted people to be able to make connections, not just with us, but the individual wines themselves. So I came up with the idea of giving each wine a specific personality based on either specific piece of music, a composer, just something that really captured what I felt was the essence and just the feeling of what that wine was all about. And part of it was, every piece or composer we used had to feature the French horn significantly. So I've played almost all of the pieces that I've named these wines after. But we talk about that when folks are at the winery. So that's important because the bubbly that we have, it's called Joy. And it's for
Yeah.
Beethoven's Ninth Ode to Joy. And while I don't expect folks to know the majority of the pieces that I've used to name the wines, unless they're big into classical music, this is one that we've all heard of, right? So it's bubbly, it's joyous, and of course, Ode to Joy. What else is there? So this is made from a grape called Seyval Blanc, and it's a grape that you just rarely, if ever, find on the West Coast. In fact, we're the only folks in the Willamette Valley that grow this, only the second in the state of Oregon. And where you normally find this grape is in the Finger Lakes in Western New York. But it's also planted down into the mid-Atlantic states, up into the Midwest. And my wife and I moved here from Ohio, so we saw a lot of this grape planted there. Those really nicely in colder weather climates. So Oregon being, in the Willamette Valley at least, being a cooler, wetter, shorter growing season, we knew it would do very well here, and it has. We do both a still and a sparkling version of it. So what you have is the sparkling, that's the Joy.
Yep.
And so, what I always talk about when folks are at the winery is that Seyval Blanc has some characteristics that make it a really good candidate for a sparkling wine. One is it's for a white, it's got a pretty thick texture to it. It doesn't taste anything like a Chardonnay, but it certainly has kind of the thickness, viscosity that a Chardonnay would. The other thing that it has is a very powerful fruit flavor, both of which are really important because when we add the bubbles, we're going to thin the wine out texturally, and we're going to mute those flavors. So I want to make sure that we have enough, both in terms of texture and flavor, to carry through even once we've gotten kind of that muted effect. So this is a Brut. So from a sugar perspective, this is going to be dry, but I don't want this to be bone dry. You know, I focus so much on texture with my wines, and I kind of don't want that just, you know, that effect in the back where you're just begging for a little bit, just a little bit of juice. So that's where that back palate sweetness on this really helps to soften it up and just make it a really pleasant little sparkling to enjoy.
It is. So why did you decide to do this when you had the still? What made you want to make it bubbly version?
So I have to say I've been resistant to doing a sparkling for a long time, mainly because I've had a lot of other really bad sparklings in my life. And there are so many ways that a sparkling could go wrong. You know, it can be too sweet, it can be too dry, it can be too effervescent. You know, I say if you have a sparkling that feels like Alka-Seltzer, you know, that's just not what you want in a wine. So it really took getting the technique refined to the point where I felt comfortable doing something like this. And the other part was it had to be the right wine. You know, I think if you start with a thin wine and you add bubbles to it, you're going to end up with something that just texturally doesn't really work. So, you know, we really had to thread the needle. And it took a long time in the development of the vines, the Seyval vines on our property, to finally get to the point maturity-wise where I thought, you know, at this point, I think we could go ahead and try it. But, you know, this is the very first sparkling that I've ever made. I mean, I started as an amateur winemaker years and years ago, back when we lived in Ohio. And even back then, I never made a sparkling. So I've been kind of equal parts excited and terrified about this wine at the same time until I saw how it was going to come back. But, you know, this is kind of a good look into how I go about making wine, because a lot of what I do sort of starts with intention. You know, think about how things are going to come together before we start. Think about the ways that it can go sideways on us, and really try to make sure that, you know, through our minds, that we've worked through a lot of these issues and can really focus on making a great quality product. Because when you're as small as we are, you can't afford to have any bad product out there. They've all got to be excellent. You know, and of course, everybody has individual tastes, but if you can walk out of a place and say, hey, I tasted a bunch of wines that are all really well made, then it's mission accomplished on my part. And so this really gets to play into that.
So are you going to keep doing it?
Oh, I'm going to keep doing it. Yeah, the early returns have been very positive. I've been very pleased. And you know, the other part is that, you know, in the valley where I am, there is so much of a focus on a very small number of varietals. So just the fact that we have this grape at all to work with is something that sets us apart. And when folks come in the tasting room, you know, they tell me that one of the reasons that they pick us out is that we sort of expand folks' horizons beyond just the typical of what people find in our region. So, you know, because of that, and because of the overwhelmingly positive response, and because that I really liked how it turned out, all the more reason to keep doing it. So, you know, we'll never make a bunch of it, but we don't make a bunch of anything. You know, we made about 40 cases this first year. I have about 2 cases left. So we'll bump up a little bit for next year, but I think we've proven the concept, and I think it's only going to get better and better.
Oh yeah, I agree. And how much do you make of the still?
Oh, the still we make about the same. It's going to be about 40, 50 cases a year. Kind of depends on what the yields are from that particular yield, or from that particular vintage. But what's interesting is, you know, there's really very little difference between the still and the sparkling. They start in the same tank. We make one large batch. We take about half of what's there and bottle it in the still, and that's called the Helios. We take the other half and we add the bubbles, and that becomes Joy. So they're starting life in exactly the same way, And it's always interesting to folks, when they see what those differences are between the two, just from a sensory standpoint. I mean, you of course expect with bubbles there's going to be some difference, but it's really been surprising to us exactly how big of a difference between, for example, the fruit flavors that we taste and some of the textural things that we get, what those have been. But it makes it a lot of fun. I mean, they're two very different wines, even though they
Yeah.
start from the same place.
Yeah. They're more like fraternal twins, I guess. Um, the next wine I have, and we're going to talk about, is your Prelude Rosé. And so this sticks with me because of the first article about we pair this with mac and cheese. This is your burger rosé. So
Exactly.
tell people why that is and why this rosé is different, I guess, because it is different to me. It's got
It
more
is.
going on than a lot of rosés do.
Definitely. There's definitely more complexity here. A lot of this is sort of my reactions to a lot of the rosés that I see getting made around me in the valley. And a lot of times we see more of the French Provençal style, which is lighter, which is thinner, which kind of has more of that acidic bite to it. Really good summer wines, but I just don't see them as being very versatile and being able to be used otherwise. And for me, versatility in wine is so important. I like people to be able to use wines in a lot of different situations. So for me, I'm making something more of an Italian style risotto. So that means there's got to be three things to it. It's got to have depth, it's got to have length in the finish, and it has to feel soft and round on the palate so that it's something that you're willing to put with food. So this has got much more of a heftier profile than almost any other rosé that gets made in the valley. So when we think about how we pair our wines, we always tell folks that we're probably going to be the least pretentious wine and food pairing people you'll ever see. We're everyday livers, just like everybody else, and we certainly don't eat caviar and any of the real fancy stuff like you always hear wine pairings being discussed. We talk more about burgers off the grill and barbecue and Thanksgiving dinner, the things that we all enjoy. So, that's sort of where we view this rosé more as going. It's certainly a beautiful, nice sipper, but at the same time, don't be afraid to pair this with food. This will stand up to a lot of different things, and it's just you can't say that about most rosés out there, certainly from this area.
Oh yeah, I agree. And I like that about this rosé, that it's got some texture, it's got more body, and it really I tasted it as you describe it, and that's exactly what I got. And I kept thinking this is probably your not just your mac and cheese, but your grilled cheese sandwich rosé too.
Oh, absolutely,
This is your
absolutely.
comfort food rosé. Yeah.
We don't discriminate much. And, I kind of like to be able to pair this with, like I say, darn near everything. And that's kind of what I like to think about all of our wines is that we give people a lot of choices in sort of how to use them, what to put it with. The sky's the limit. I always love to hear from other folks, what it is that, or how it is that they choose to use them. But yeah, for us, this is something that, absolutely can go with, the night sitting by the campfire, but with the beef barbecue dinners. And, we sell a lot of it to Texas, when people are eating their beef
Yeah.
brisket in the middle of the summer and it's 95% humidity. You guys still like your wine. So, we want something that's going to stand up to that food, but still give you something that's nice and fruit forward and refreshing. So that's where this falls nicely.
Yeah, and I have the sheets in front of me that you cold soak for 44 hours.
Mhm.
And then you do a little malolactic ferment, which is very different for a rosé, which gives it that mouthfeel and more heft to stand up to the barbecue.
Well, that's that roundness that I talk about, right?
Yeah,
Because for the most part, when I see rosés, they have all of that malic acid in there, and that's of course in reds we go through that malolactic fermentation to convert the malic acid into the much softer lactic acid.
yeah,
And if you don't do that, you're going to get this big acid, just all of it just seems to concentrate and hit your palate in one place on the back. And, especially if you're going to make a bolder wine, to have the boldness, the big fruit flavors, but then have the acidity, it just doesn't make any sense with texturally. So that's where going through that malolactic fermentation just helps to soften everything up. We get that nice roundness, and it allows that fruit to push forward so much more because you don't have the acid getting in the way and fighting it.
Yeah, that's great. I love this rosé.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I
Yeah.
do, and I'll just never forget that mac and cheese and a burger, and
You know, we,
it
we, we say,
stuck.
we have kids and, well, a child, and, we don't eat, we eat good and healthy, but it's not always sort of the standard fare that you always hear about. So, we always want to talk to our customers, right where they are. And, we're humans too. We eat the same stuff everybody else does. So we need wines that are going to go with our everyday foods and how we eat in this country, in this culture.
Yeah. And then I have the last wine is the Maestro Estate Reserve Pinot.
Hmm?
So tell me why well, Maestro means it's your top, I'm guessing.
No, not
And
exactly. Not
not
exactly. I mean,
exactly.
top is one of those things that's so dependent on personal taste. I say, right now we're making 4 different Pinot Noirs. Some of them are reserves, some of them are not. But in my view, they're all the same in terms of quality. It's really a question of distinctiveness in how we put them together. And frankly, I'll get a lot of customers in here, and some of them will like the reserves best, and some of them will like the non-reserves best. There's really no rhyme or reason to it. But what you're getting here with Maestro is a brand new Pinot that we put out for the first time this year. And
Okay.
one of the things I should say is that, as with all my Pinots, I really focus on making sure each one is very different from each other one. We have a lot of wines in this area. We have a lot of Pinot, and there are a lot of places you can go and taste 3, 4 Pinots, and you can walk out and say, yeah, these all tasted exactly the same and they felt exactly the same. So, for me, I wanted each one to give you a very, very different experience. So I have one called the Titan, for example, that rolls like a wave across your tongue. It builds in the middle and then falls off. I have one called Candide, which brings more spicy and peppery notes to it, so it feels more like it's dancing on your tongue. And Maestro is an opportunity to do something a little bit different. So Maestro is our John Williams tribute wine.
Okay.
And everybody, if you don't know the name John Williams, you certainly know his music because he's done hundreds of
Yeah.
big music scores for films over the years. As we're speaking, I think he's 91 these days
Oh,
and
wow.
just still conducting and just phenomenal. And when you hear a movie score that he wrote, what the French horns always are, they're always that arcing, that soaring over the orchestra and all of these beautiful high melodies. So I wanted this to kind of feel like a John Williams horn piece. So where this hits your palate is up high. It's stuffed and it makes a big arc all the way across the top of your palate. And I can do that because of the individual clones or strains of Pinot Noir that I use to do it. The main clone here is called 943. And the best thing I can compare it to is Petit Verdot. It's bright, it's got a lot of color to it. It really hits your palate up high. On its own, it doesn't have a lot of depth and it doesn't bring a lot of length all the way on the back, but I can bring other clones to the party that will help to do that. So the other 2 that are here, one is called 113, which adds the mid palate savoriness, so it hits you a little bit lower. So that's where our depth comes in. And then we have 667, and 667 hits your palate high and in the very, very back. So that helps to stretch that 943 all the way through and helps to begin that finish at a higher point. So it just sticks with you and lingers with you longer. So every Pinot I make, I go through some version of what we've just talked about, when it comes to crafting it and thinking about what that shape is going to be like. But with that 943 clone, it just gives us something that no other clone can give you. So I decided that it would really be fun to have a wine that can really play off of that brightness, play off of those high tones. And it's so different than everything else we do, but it's so much fun to see folks' reactions, and it's really something they enjoy.
Well, that's what I remember the times I've tasted with you is really each one of your wines is like a musical piece and it has its components and the whole is greater than the individual parts. And that's the way you wanted it to be, like for it to come together and each person have their role, each instrument have their role, each clone has their role. So
Yes,
that's what I remember about that.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I always say, these clones, and I tell people, there's a whole advanced college level class that could be taught on these individual Pinot clones. And most wines that you taste from the Willamette Valley are made up of multiple ones, and sometimes they get just sort of thrown together. I just put a lot more intention into it. The best way I can describe it is that when I taste a wine, the way my brain works is that I hear it as much as I taste it. So that sort of helps in my crafting opportunities to be able to say, okay, I have this, this one clone, which could be an instrument. What would really complement this? What would help it to give it some things? How do we build kind of a more well-rounded piece of music around this bit part? And so it's something that folks can, at least I think connect with a lot better. Music is something, of course, that it's an emotional thing, just as wine is an emotional thing. So, what people don't necessarily have to, get all the nitty-gritty details of what we're doing, but they can certainly get the concepts and in a way that just makes sense, and it kind of brings them into the story directly on what we're doing.
Well, I was just talking with another winemaker and someone asked a question. It was a Zoom chat, and they were like, so do you see the wine while you're making it, like what you're going for and stuff like that? And they likened it to being a music composer,
Mhm.
that you sort of have this end thing you're thinking about and what can you make, how can you make that happen? And they likened it to music, but I think you liken it to music more than any winemaker I know. And it's because your background and you understand it and but yeah, that is really cool. You're a wine composer.
I'd say that's true more than anything. It's not that on my business card, but it probably should be.
You can add that to your list of duties, right?
Oh, I
Like you're
guess,
not doing
yeah.
anything else. So just a really quick question. How about harvest there? What's it looking like? You said you're going to start this weekend.
We're going to start this weekend. Harvest looks really good. It's been an interesting year. It started late because we had spring that it was very wet and very cold. So we
Yeah.
had bud break about 2 weeks later than usual. But then we caught up. It was a very warm year. So, we had probably about 4 or 5 days where it was up in the 104, 105 range.
Wow.
And I know that's nothing compared to, what folks down south deal with. But for here, that's quite difficult. But we're looking at the sugars and the acids really coming in about where we want to see them. So that's really exciting. And so yeah, it'll be very interesting to see when stuff comes in, but flavors seem great. I'm excited to get stuff in and to really start to see what we have. But yeah, we're in the final days, so there's a lot of cleaning, a lot of prep. There's boy, it's the countdown is on.
And what are you bringing in first?
We're going to
What's
bring
your
in
first?
all of the Pinot Noir first.
Oh,
Based on
wow,
what we're
that's
seeing, the
different.
Pinot is going to be ready to go first. The Seyval Blanc is probably going to be a week later than that. We also make Syrah, which is probably another week to 2 weeks away. And we also make Pinot Blanc, which is probably 2 to maybe 3 weeks away. So the good news is that getting all the Pinot done in a weekend, that's going to make some things a little bit easier. And at that point, we'll have the vast majority of our vineyard picked. So, still things to do, but we're kind of getting, I think, the hardest part out of the way first, and then we can kind of assess where the rest of it's going to go as we get into the next few weeks. And hopefully the weather keeps holding up for us. It's been warm, it's been dry, and looks like it's going to be that way all the way through harvest. So yeah, it's fingers crossed and all that. I never like to say too many positive things, because I've been doing this too long, and things change on you in a heartbeat. But if we keep going the way we've been going, I think we're going to have some pretty good results from 23.
That sounds good. And people that will watch this won't know, maybe, but that you get volunteers to come help you do harvest, which a lot of wineries don't do. I got the call via email, and if I were closer, I would be there. But I haven't ruled out a future weekend, because Sarah said if I came there during harvest, I'd be working.
that is unfortunately part of being part of our family, is that you do. Yeah. And it's really, we have a wonderful group of folks that come up and help us. We have professional pickers that actually do the pick. And goodness, they do such an amazing job. They're so quick, they're so efficient. And I certainly don't want amateurs down there with them. But where they can help us is, once the fruit has been picked, to help us to sort through it, to find the best of the best, and to kind of take anything out of there that we don't want to see, whether that be underripe clusters, overripe clusters, leaves, sticks, kind of any of that stuff. And to kind of help us pull that out. And we've been doing this long enough now to where we have a fun group. It's wonderful folks. We work, but it's not, the typical commercial winery. You could have 15, 18-hour days. Lord knows we're not doing anything like that. We're trying to keep it to a good 6-7 hour day for the volunteers at the most. And we feed people and we give them wine, and I kind of find people do darn near anything for you when you feed them and give them wine. So
that's right.
we try to make it fun and laugh a lot, and yeah, just kind of trying to show folks that this is a community thing. When you go to Italy or Spain or France, a lot of times the harvest is a big community activity. So, we're really trying to recapture sort of that same spirit here.
It sounds good. It was so nice to talk to you again.
Well, it's great catching up with you, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for having me.
And maybe I'll pop up there. I'll check my schedule on your harvest schedule. Maybe I'll be harvesting the Pinot Blanc or something.
You are welcome anytime. Anytime.
Well, thank you again so much.
You bet. You bet. Have a good evening. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye.